If you'd seen what I'd seen, you'd be just like me. I'm a prisoner of what I know. I'm a victim of what I've seen. I can't change. I won't change. I'll never change. I'm going to become worse. And that is a fact.
Hey everyone, I'm here with one of my personal heroes. I just say, come on, look at the background. We just changed the camera angle, but before that you could see all the awards. And Philip Wollen, one of my personal heroes, and he is the former president of Citibank, a very successful person who is dedicating his entire life to saving animals and human and non-human animals, really, and the environment. I have a lot of respect for this person. And just to show you how much he means to me, if you go to any of my YouTube videos, his speech is linked there. And I think it's one of the most powerful speeches ever done. So thank you for being here. And I see also a lot of books in your background. I want to go to that. But right now we were just chatting and you were telling me about how you flew under the radar by using another name to just get what needs to be done. So tell me about that.
Oh, yes. About 40 years ago when I decided I was a merchant banker and I decided I'd seen so much cruelty and suffering and corruption throughout my career as I traveled around the world, I had to make a very important decision. I decided to leave and take all the money I'd ever made and give it away with warm hands and die broke. And so far, we're right on budget. But I didn't want it to be done in my name, so I wanted to be invisible. So I concocted a name, and I called it the Winsome Constance Kindness. Winsome is my mother, Constance is my grandmother, and kindness is kindness. So for many years, I flew under the radar, nobody knew about me. But as my footprint increased, today we have over 500 projects we support in 40 countries. You can't stay invisible for long. So I still use the name from time to time, but not for that purpose anymore. My cover's blown and I've been exposed.
I'm glad that you're exposed because I think it's really important for other people to have a role model and see how a successful person, humanity is not just about money and it's not just about our greedy needs. At some point, you're like, there is a higher purpose and I want to devote my life to it. And so it's good to know these people. So I love that. So what's your favorite book? This wasn't one of my questions, but now seeing all those books, what is your favorite book?
Well, I'm rereading Homer's Odyssey at the moment. I've read it many times, and every time I open a page, I see it in a different light. I think, was it Hegel who said that you can't get into the same river twice because every time you do that, it's a different river and you're a different person. And I find the books are much the same thing. And I don't know, maybe it was Kafka who said it, I might be wrong, that books are secret keys to private rooms of locked doors in your own castle. I guess I've read a little bit over the years. So, and I was just explaining before we started filming, I've had several thousand books in my private library at home, and I'm in the process of giving them away before I kick the bucket. I don't want to leave them here, somebody else to deliver to a local charity when I'm gone. So I'm giving them as personal gifts to friends whenever I see them.
That is amazing. So I actually don't know, how long have you been vegan?
I think nearly 35 to 40 years. And to tell you the truth, I find I should tell you how. Do you want me to tell you how it started? It's the most banal sort of story. But
I don't think people know that about you, so I want that to be known.
Most of the speeches I give are fact-rich, numbers, strategies, capital raising, with climate change, animal cruelty, ethics, philosophy, theology, have all those fact-rich things. But I never like talking about myself unless I'm with my friends or talking to you like this. I used to be a merchant banker in my 30s. I was specializing in corporate finance. I went out to see one of my major clients, and he had interests in many different industries. And one of the companies they owned turned out to be a slaughterhouse. Now, at the time, I have to say, my favorite food was filet mignon and lobster, a fact for which I'm so profoundly ashamed today. But what I saw that day in that slaughterhouse absolutely terrified me. It changed me profoundly. I became a vegetarian on the spot, but I didn't know a thing about dairy. I was quite ignorant. And then I was on a business trip to review a large bank's operations in India. I always thought that dairy was this beautiful sight of rolling hills, green fields, streams, cows in the meadow, calves playing. But it turned out to be not the case. The dairy industry is a vile, disgusting gulag of despair. So I was walking down the streets of India and I noticed that a dairyman was dragging his cow on a rope to the slaughterhouse. The cow had been hit by a lorry and had broken her spine. She could barely walk. And to get her to move, he was throwing chili powder into her eyes and shoving sharp objects up her anus. Beside her walked her skinny, starving little calf that had not been fed for a long time. Well, when he got to the gates of the slaughterhouse, and before he handed this cow over to the butcher, the bastard milked her. So even at the last moment of her life, she was still being abused by a human. Now, if that doesn't change the heart of a man, nothing will. Well, I came back to Australia and I studied the industry, and that's when I discovered what a brutal, nasty, squalid place the dairy was. And I became something of an expert on it. And I stopped consuming dairy. And I never became vegan. That's why I can never answer the question honestly. When did you become vegan? Just that one day I looked at myself and I noticed I didn't eat meat or dairy. I didn't hunt, I never did. My belt, my watch band, my shoes had no animal products. I just realized I never became vegan. I just was. So I didn't have a time when I said, like St. Paul on the road to Damascus, that was my Damascene moment. That wasn't Archimedes sitting in the bathtub and saying, Eureka. It never happened like that. No apple fell on my head and discovered gravity. No, I just woke up and there it was. Sorry, it's a long, boring story, but that was my transition.
No, I think I agree. In a way, we are all born vegan. We are born with compassion and kindness to other animals. And the test for that is just put a little chicken in front of a kid and an apple and just watch which one she's going to eat, which one she's going to hug and play with. But unfortunately, because of the cognitive dissonance, because of the conditioning, social conditioning, we just lose that empathy. And it sounds like you and I have this thing in common. For me, veganism was that I just call it a triple point, because before becoming vegan, I had a lot of compassion for animals, except I ate them, ironically. I really liked the environment, wanted to do environmental protection, and I wanted to help people. And that's why I studied biomedical sciences. Veganism was that triple point for me that connected all these three dots. It sounds like you also care about all three areas, and in your philanthropic work, you support all three. But if you wanted to tell someone why they should go vegan or become vegan again, like the way they were born, how would you approach a person?
The secret, I think, of in any movement, but particularly in this particular one, is to meet people where they are, not tell them where they should be and tell them why they're there. Meet them where they are. And that's why I think the idea of using veganism as a metaphor, the Swiss Army knife, in that metaphor solves or meets them everywhere, whether they're worried about their health, their finances, the economies, the environment, or climate change, or cruelty, all those things. But I usually like to set the stage so at least we're on the same page, if you like. Put them into kind of historical perspective. Now, in human history, only 100 billion human beings have ever lived. 8 billion people are alive today. And we humans torture and kill 2 billion sentient, living, loving animals every week. And we stab and suffocate 1 billion ocean animals every 8 hours. If we were killed at the same rate, we would be wiped out in one weekend. 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one species. And we now face the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. Trillions of fish are ground up into pellets to feed the livestock. Vegetarian cows are now the world's largest ocean predators. The oceans are dying in our time. In this generation, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth. If this generation knew what the previous generation had done, they would bring back the guillotine. And oceans sequester more CO2 than all the forests of the world put together. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call it a virus. It is a crime of unimaginable proportions. So I say that Meat it's not an industry. It's actually an atrocity, a squalid, cruel bacchanalia of butchery. And Victor Hugo said that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But I say there is nothing more destructive than a bad idea whose time has passed. The time for meat has passed. And this is not just about animal rights. It's actually about human wrongs. Animal rights is now the greatest social justice issue since the abolition of slavery. And I always say, and this is an absolute truth, it is a revolutionary event. It is more powerful than the Industrial Revolution, the Reformation, the Hubble telescope, or anything ever conceived by Galileo, Copernicus, Einstein, Darwin, or Freud, because it protects the most precious of all things, life. Vegans are on the right side of history. They are creating the new enlightenment, the second renaissance. That's a good enough reason to go vegan.
It always gives me goosebumps when you mention that animal rights is, about the biggest form of oppression of all time, which is true. I always care about humans. That's the whole reason I started doing biomedical research, but I wasn't vegan at the time. And when I became vegan, when I learned about the scale of animal suffering, I always describe it as when you have these bar graphs, but then suddenly you add a new data, which is like orders of magnitude higher, and everything else just becomes so small you can barely. It's like the number of animals that we kill and torture. Something that recently happened to me, I think you saw on Facebook, I was doing some investigations in some dairy farms recently. I went to them. And I've also been in Auschwitz, and I felt a similar thing between the two experiences. In Auschwitz, I remember I wasn't like emotionally super sad just because my brain couldn't handle the sadness that it couldn't process. I told myself logically that just think about the people who suffered in this land. But it's just like, it's so many of them, it's so much suffering that I couldn't process. And I had the same exact feeling when I was in this dairy farm. I could see all the calves being taken away on tiny crates, and the other side of me, there were the mothers. But there were so many, there was 50,000 cows in that farm that I was just like, I don't know how to feel. It's so much large, it's so large in the scale that it's more than what I can comprehend. And that's what I try to bring to universities, to tell people that veganism is a moral urgency. We don't have time every second, 5,000 animals. What are some of the most effective strategies that you found in animal rights movement in order to be where we want to be, which would be a place where animals are no longer exploited for who they are by humans?
In a space like this, one size doesn't fit all. The word strategy comes from the Greek root strategos, the art of the general of an army. And in historical times, you would know that generals put themselves in the front line. They would lead. They would put themselves in harm's way. I'm sure at some stage you would have read Sun Tzu in The Art of War.
Yes,
and you might have read von Clausewitz, the Prussian. And you might have read Homer's Odyssey. Or you might have read about the Peloponnesian Wars or the Punic Wars. And these people, they actually, when you read it, and even if the translation is not good into English, but it's the only language I know, but even if the translation is not perfect, you can actually hear the heartbeat of these battle-hardened soldiers who could actually smell the breath of their war horses. They were there. So I say today, when we talk about strategios, the real general, the true real general of historical times, he is not a man with medals and ribbons showing great elan and flair. He's actually a very lonely man. He sits alone at night in his tent, thinking most of all about the shoes of his soldiers, whether they had holes in them. That is the real general. But today, our generals sit in ergonomically designed chairs in Texas, calling in a drone strike in Iraq or somewhere in the Middle East or Syria. They are not the generals. They're playing games. And in many ways, that is what's happened to this balkanized animal rights, animal welfare movement. We've got these cyber warriors we've got these new CEOs, real activists, the people I spend my time with and I love, and I invest my time, my energy, my money, my dreams, my hopes, the rest of my life. Those people, they punch above the weight in boxers. They punch above their weight class. A lightweight is fighting a middleweight or a heavyweight. That's what these guys are. They punch above their weight. But the CEOs of some of these NGOs that I see from time to time, they punch a clock. They start at 9, they go home at 5. I think it was Voltaire who says that the French rant and rave against the government, eat their dinner, and go to bed. So these guys talk about building strategies for their NGOs. And they prepare these beautiful, glossy publications to convince credulous donors. And of course, they're on board, so they keep their jobs. But once again, I remember Professor Drucker from Harvard, great guy, he said, culture beats strategy for breakfast. Our culture has to be changed. Not out there in the marketplace, but the meat eaters. We need to change the culture of the activist movement. We don't necessarily need more activists. We don't necessarily need smarter activists. We need better activists. And they are out there. So in the short time that this human species has left, if you like, changing the culture of activism is the key challenge. And that is where I think I've been very fortunate in that I've been able, because I don't report to anybody, I don't have direct, even though I'm asked to go on many boards, I'm the patron of me, but I don't have any direct influence. I'm able to influence them and as a result, influence their constituencies. Like you may have heard in India, in one event in the Rajiv Gandhi Center in New Delhi, Amartya Sen, who had just got India's Nobel Prize in economics, and he went to Cambridge. Man's a great man, of course. And I was terrified to see him sitting there listening to me talk about numbers, because this guy knows numbers better than anybody. So I was terrified. But when it was over, people in that audience said, we are going to convert our factories to all shifts on our factories to vegetarian. And we're talking about 1 million meals a day. Now, that is the power of leverage. One day I've written a paper, but my filing system's not very good. But I talked about leverage, veganism's best friend, the mathematics of leverage. And one day when I find it, I'll send it to you, but I'll find it, I'm sure, at some stage. So that is the situation with this very balkanized, almost cultish movement we've got. And I think you asked me the other day, what should we do about the animal rights movement? We must understand that the movement should not be a noun. It should be a verb, to actually move. I can remember in the 90s and the early 2000s, every weekend there'd be an event. I'm very active with Sea Shepherd. I did something every single day. I never had a day off in 27 years, not one day off. That kind of emotional, intellectual, moral energy is valuable. And activists need to possess that and not, as I say, punch a clock and try to keep their jobs. And there are too many of them around. I could name them, and one day I will, but there are too many of them. On the other hand, there are some wonderful young activists coming through, and you're one. You're a perfect exemplar of a new breed, which is why since I got to hear about you in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've taken a particular interest in promoting everything you do. Because there are people like you, I think I want to, whatever little I've got to offer you to my network or my information, whatever, I'm more than happy to share. Because one of the messages I try to give to activists and to people generally, the human species, is this: there is nothing we can't achieve if we don't care who gets the credit for it.
I do agree with you. I loved when you said that you haven't had a single day off, because I think when you are in the right place, you don't need a day off. There is no time to take a day off. This is not a movement of 8 to 5 job. And I really hope that I love that you said that, because I'm new in running a nonprofit. I've been doing animal activism for 10 years, but running a nonprofit is not something that I've done for 40 years. So the culture that I really want to build is to work with people who don't look at it as an 8 to 5 job, because it's not 8 to 5 job to me. It shouldn't be for anyone else. And animals don't when we have Christmas days, we get together, animals don't get a break from being slaughtered and not being captivated. So what does that ideal culture look like to you? And what do you think is the most, it wasn't one of my actual questions, but I think it's super important. What do you think keeps nonprofits from being effective? What is that poison that you see? And what is the ideal culture? I love that you said that you are in charge, so you can actually like build that culture that is really ideal. You mentioned that, but I want a clear image of what that actually looks like.
Yeah, there are some NGOs, some organizations that you walk into and you can feel the electricity in the room, and you know right away these people don't see it as a job. In your memo to me, you used the word career 4 or 5 times. And I was going to suggest, we'll try to take that word out of our vocabulary. We're not looking for a career. We are trying to accept our calling, our culture. And then we no longer have a job. From the moment you wake up, you're energized, you're innovated, your imagination is captured, you're full of love and anger at the same time. And most of all, you feel there is nothing you can't achieve because you now have a calling. You have courage, you have a commitment, and you don't need a career.
You just described my feelings. That's such a smart way of looking at it. Yeah, I don't think I like careers anymore. I'm not going to use it. What is your calling? Fantastic advice. I was particularly saddened this year when I saw that like a lot of my emails got banned when I was emailing people because like the last 20 days of like December, people just don't work. And I'm like, this is not a job. This is not a work. Sure, take a day off, but like, I don't understand that. But glad that people like you are here. And part of what I'm trying to do is to make sure that your voice is heard and we can learn from your experience, because I don't think we have enough of that. What are your thoughts on humane washing and greenwashing and I guess incremental changes that we see? I want to say that I do think that everyone in the movement at least wants good things. Everyone has good intentions. But what are your thoughts about, basically humane washing? Sometimes I feel like it promotes in a way that instead of people not eating these animal products, now they just do that, except that it's removal of guilt. And I guess I'm particularly interested in knowing, I feel like a lot of people who also fund this sort of things are personally not vegan. So that's why the cause is not so dear to them as much as it is to us. And that's why it kind of distracts the conversation from that like end goal animal liberation to temporary measures that I don't think are very sophisticated and work long-term. But I would like to know what you think about it.
Yes, that's absolutely true. For time immemorial, I wrote down a note here that I wanted to talk to you about, but I don't know if I've thrown it away. It actually referred to that because of what's going on in the United States in the movement at the moment. It goes something along the lines, I talked about rights in generally. The battle for rights ultimately are always fought first in the marketplace of ideas. That's where they start. Whether they're human rights or women's rights or Black rights or the rights of children or the handicapped or the rights of refugees, which are so common and so prevalent nowadays, or rights of prisoners or prisoners of war. And of course, the most important one today, by sheer numbers and weight alone, is animal rights, the most significant one. Now, these movements are always susceptible to being hijacked by vested interests or political interests. We know that. And they will use the terminology to greenwash and to spin, and they've got better spin doctors than we could possibly imagine. Unfortunately, our efforts, people like you and I and many others, are often impaired, actually, by well-meaning people, as you say, well-meaning welfareists, who are actually very timid souls with very modest ambitions. Very often they're not even vegan, but there's an even worse, more insidious type. There are several CEOs of major American NGOs who claim to be vegan and are not, and have been caught. So they're playing both sides of the fence. They're the worst of all creatures. But because they have this cult following, they are immune, like Donald Trump, from all criticism. So I think I posted some comment the other day talking about this notion of rights. The suffragettes didn't fight for women's welfare. They demanded women's rights. And I believe in rights, not welfare. Where alchemy ends, chemistry begins. Where astrology ends, astronomy begins. Where animal welfare ends, animal rights begin. I believe in starting at the beginning, just like you do. We start with rights. And in the process, the welfare, like the rising tide, will float all boats. But we start with rights.
Thank you. I think sometimes we lose that connection and we start doing a lot of math and statistics that if we do this, multiple that by a gazillion, which is the number of like chickens that we kill. And anything you do, if you multiply that by, I don't know, by billions, it's going to end up in a large number. So if you gave every chicken 1 extra centimeter or inch, multiply that by 1 billion or trillion, it just becomes so large. And you can show it in numbers that it's a lot of impact. But if I put myself in place of that chicken, I don't know how much it means. And I don't know how much it improves our movement to reach animal liberation, which is the final goal.
Yes, yes.
So one of the things that I always find challenging is I don't think we just need more vegans. You kind of mentioned this. We need more vegans who are active, who use their voice. You mentioned very beautifully that just the sheer number of vegetarians and vegans, if we add them up, it's like bigger than several countries altogether, which means that we have a lot of passion, but a lot of power. But we are not using it. A lot of these people don't feel empowered enough to speak up. And part of what I'm really trying to do, and I don't say I have the answer, but I'm doing my best to figure it out, is how to get the vegans that we already have active. Because I wholeheartedly believe that we don't need to make the world vegan by making every single person vegan. No other social justice worked that way. We had a minority of dedicated and thoughtful individuals who led the movement. And we do have those numbers, except that not everyone is vocal, not everyone is speaking up. What do you suggest? So put yourself in my position. You're in universities, you're talking, you have a lot of vegans, but not a lot of them are super active or want to get active. How do you resonate? How do you ignite that fire in someone that you know has that compassion and is already vegan?
Very astute question. Like you, I speak at a lot of universities and parliaments, etc. And the problem for us is this: the audience thinks that the vegetarian vegan community is small. What I do is, before they've had a chance to settle into their seats and get comfortable, I disabuse them of all the bullshit notions they carry. There are over 600 million vegetarians and vegans in the world, and that is bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, all put together. If they were one nation, they would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. They're bigger than OPEC. They are bigger than NATO. And despite this massive demographic footprint, they are still drowned out by the wokus and killing cretins who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question. So now the audience understands, okay, there's a big community out there who are being shouted down or ignored. And this person in front of me is speaking on their behalf. He's giving us facts. He's giving us information that we need. And he's explaining it in a way which is non-judgmental. And he's also explaining that if we don't follow it, we face an existential threat. I think I better listen. And they do. So I think that's how I do it. I'm not saying that would be yours, but it's just a suggestion if that helps. So now, how do we get those vegans to become activists? Once again, it's a spectrum. At one end, you might have people like the RSPCA, very weak, milquetoast kind of people. I call them the Royal Society for Pretending to Care for Animals. They're at that end. And then you have the guys at the ALF. You know, they're the beat them up, drag them out, bring it on kind of guys. This is a broad church. Everybody is welcome. So there are vegans like me who are not afraid to stand up to the brutes and the bullies in politics or the industry and elsewhere. But there are others who are more reticent. Even they can serve I know of a little old lady. She's a vegan. She became vegan when she was 65. She's 93 now. She's my mum. And she can't go out and wave a flag, or she can't stand in front of a slaughterhouse gate. She's very frail. But she will go into a shoe shop and ask for vegan shoes. Or if I take her somewhere, she says, "Hope you don't mind, sir, but I'm a vegan. Is there anything you can feed me?" It gets people thinking. It's not a guy like one of my Sea Shepherd fellows, 6'4", 280 pounds with 300 tattoos saying, "Bring me a vegan meal." It's a sweet, beautiful lady, gorgeously dressed, saying, "I'm a vegan. May I please have a meal?" The entire agenda has changed. So that's the other kind. There's room for all of us. Every one of their strategies is equally effective at the micro level. But if we all do the same thing, it will have a massive multiplier effect. For us, when I was a boy, behind my school chapel was a jungle, small jungle, and full of trees and bushes, and full of cobwebs. And I was kind of a lonely kid. And I would go there and I'd pull a little strand of a web, and I'd try to figure out how the shape of the web would change. And it always changed in unpredictable, non-linear ways. I called it my enchanted web. And that's how it really helped me in my future career. I realized that everything is connected to everything, even small things. And then I read about the butterfly effect. I read about Gleck's book, Chaos. A butterfly flapping her wings in the Amazon jungle affects weather in Africa, typhoons in the South China Seas, drought in Australia. Little things. My mum has sown a seed at the guy in the restaurant. She's sown a seed at the lady in the shoe shop. We all have a power to play. My mum is actually not an activist. She's a proactivist. She doesn't know it. She's taking the initiative. Before something happened, she made something else happen. And that is the kind of culture I'm trying to bring out in some of these young people at various universities that I speak at, and young guys like you, intelligent, committed, hardworking. The biggest problem I think we might face in the future is that these guys will get burned out. And that's something in my lifetime, I want to find a way to counsel them to take care of their health, mental health, their energy, and their loved ones.
Actually, I'll go back to that hope. That was actually one of my questions. But I want to say this is actually, maybe I should have defined my vocabulary. When I say activism, I am redefining what activism means. To me, activism is not just going on a street and doing something. It's not just a visual. It's anything that you do that is not silence. Any step that you take. It could be sharing your vegan story. It could be using your calling, like aligning your job and like professional career with your calling. So
yeah,
that to me is activism. It's just like doing something. And so often I just find vegans who don't have that sense of urgency that they've become vegan, but they don't. And sometimes it's really easy to ignite that. When you talk to them, when I show dominion even in my talk to vegans. And I have vegans coming to me and say, "Thank you for showing us," because it's easy to forget. It's easy to disconnect that this is going on and veganism is not just your diet.
So I've got something I'm working on at the moment. I'm hoping to have it done in the next few months, and I'll send you a draft for your criticism when it's done. It'll flesh out my evolving thinking. But in every country that I've traveled to, and I've traveled a lot, we've got so many projects everywhere, I love going to the local newspapers and getting an English translation sometimes about the activism movement. And the word activist is always used in a pejorative sense, certainly in Australia, in the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe. I gave a speech in the European Parliament in Brussels, and the sneering at activists. Everywhere, the term activist has a negative connotation, except in one country, India. If you read the newspaper, they say this activist has just received a Padma Award or whatever they call it. It's said in a nice kind of way. Now, of course, in India, animal rights and the protection of animals is enshrined in Section 50, I think, of the national constitution. So maybe it's that kind of culture, if you like, that has created that kind of nomenclature. But unfortunately, I also have to say in the last 20 years, India has become more and more westernized, and their values have become not only diluted, but become poisoned by the meat and dairy drug. And there is something that I have 55 projects in India, investing heavily there. We need to stem that tide. Because I often say, you might have seen me say it, it doesn't matter what question you ask me about anything, foreign exchange prices, GDP, pollution, human population, animal cruelty, doesn't matter what question you ask, the answer is always the same. India and China, India and China, India and China. That's the future. So that's why I think we need to be tactical rather than strategic in how we handle those dynamics.
Yeah, 100% agree. I went to India recently, as you know, for my first time. I was very impressed by the culture and kindness of people. At the same time, how ingrained dairy is with Indian culture, it really surprised me. The team that was some of the people who were following me in my talks, and progressively I started talking about dairy more and more and showing Makadud and all those documentaries in my talks. We leave the talk and we sit down and we are offered milk tea. And I was like, did you even listen to me? And even people who were following me and listened to this whole thing multiple times. But that prompted me to expand in India faster than what I wanted. My co-founder is from India. And also I got connected. That was a beautiful moment that I got connected with Dr. Harsha, the director of Makadud. And I'm looking forward to working on some documentaries with him, especially in India, because I see a lot of potential in this culture. But yes, the westernization of the nation is really harmful. What gets you out of bed every day? What is the first thing you think of?
I think, as you know, my wife has been very gravely ill for the last 6 years, and much of that time in a cancer hospital. So every day is a blessing for me. And I just know that there's so much, I can't call it work. There are so many things that I have to do. I know I never get tired. And I think there's a certain degree, if you like, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, Earthling Ed. Have you heard of Earthling Ed? He came from England last week to my house. And then I took him out to have a look at some of the projects. And I was talking about Camus, that in the middle, to return to Tipasa, he says that even in the depths of winter, inside my heart, there gleams a little spark of eternal summer. And in a sense, that's how I feel. I look for the little spark. And of course, I do have my bad moments. You know, you asked, what will I tell? What will I do for young people who if I want to galvanize them into action? We can touch on that if we have time. But energizing people and myself is actually a hard thing to do when I'm feeling down, having seen something terrible. And I see a lot of terrible things. But I then think about how bad it is for that animal in the slaughterhouse or in the dairy or in the section laboratories, all of which I have seen. And all my problems just fade into insignificance in comparison. And I bound out of bed. I'm like as Ben Johnson said, like a lion refreshed, ready to take on the world. So I'm fortunate in that respect. In the limited time I've got left in life, I'm willing to throw a left hook, a right cross, and an uppercut, even as I'm going down.
You're not going. But yes, that's exactly how I feel. And I think what I try to tell others is, it's normal that the goal of life is not pursuing happiness, it's more satisfaction. So satisfaction, you can be sad and still satisfied with your life. And I think that's a misguided thinking that we need to pursue happiness. Otherwise, you can just shoot up heroin and just be very happy, but you're going to have a very unsatisfactory life. And I think it's okay to feel sad and just let that pass through us, but not cripple us, not to disable us from doing what we really have to be doing. And that was actually one of my questions, that there must be times that you feel sad, or do you ever feel like hopeless, and how you deal with that. But I do the exact same thing. I just think about animals and I'm like, too bad, suck it up, get up. They need you. Yeah. If they lose you, if they lose my work, my time, then it's just going to be a worse world for everyone. So, and one quick question: how many hours do you quote unquote work a day?
I'm unemployed, I guess, by that definition, because I don't actually work as such. But I'm not a good sleeper, so I sleep about 4 hours a night. So I also have to be alert to my wife, obviously. But even when I was a merchant banker, I worked 7 days a week, and I only took leave because it was compulsory under Australian law. But even on those trips, I would go and do something. I'd do some study, or I'd do something along those lines. I always used to joke that the chairman gave me a bonus every year without even knowing it. He gave me the keys to the building, and I could come into the bank headquarters anytime, day or night. And I did. And if I was working on a takeover, for example, some nights I wouldn't go home at all. I'd work through the night because I enjoyed the work, and there was no other place I'd rather be. And I think that's important for the young people. It's very hard to do things in a sterile environment. But but pre-COVID, every year I would take a whole bunch of activists to look at some of my projects in other countries. So I'd take people from Australia and Sweden and the United States, for example, to India, and do a big sweep for a month and look at all the projects. And that energized them more than you can imagine. But for us, when you just think about it, in China, 5,000 magnificent moon bears, their limbs are torn off in leg hole traps, are imprisoned in steel coffins welded shut, and a catheter drains bile into a bucket, which the Chinese drink. The bears go insane. In Korea, dogs are beaten to death in the marketplace because the Koreans believe that pain and suffering makes the meat tasty. In my own country, in Australia, 90 million kangaroos were butchered, and they were on our national coat of arms, on our flag, that there are animals. Our live animal export industry to the Middle East and to Indonesia, every penny I invested in the Basseterre slaughterhouses was utterly wasted. They still continue to stab out the eyes of the animals and slash their tendons. Every penny wasted. I often say, to people when they argue with me, come with me on one of my project trips. Spend a month with me. I guarantee you'll be a different person at the end. Then come and argue with me. If you'd seen what I'd seen, you'd be just like me. I'm a prisoner of what I know. I'm a victim of what I've seen. I can't change. I won't change. I'll never change. I'm going to become worse. And that is a fact.
Beautiful. That's exactly the type of message I wanted to capture from this conversation. I wanted people to know, because I had no doubt. I've been following your work, and I know that how many projects you are supporting and how busy you are, all the traveling, presentations, and the insane amount of time that you spend. And when I said quote unquote work, it's exactly that. It's not work to you. And I think I wholeheartedly, what I want from the future generation is for these vegans to do things with their lives that feels exactly right, that just like that. They're working on things that mean so much for the world, and yet they don't get tired. They're not going to have weekends and holidays and long holidays because they feel that fire that you have in your heart. One last thing, it's kind of related and unrelated to veganism, but you mentioned several times on being a lonely boy, and just like it sounds like you spend a lot of times by yourself. And I think that's something that our society really pushes, the idea of being lonely is bad, being alone is bad. You have to find these external sources of happiness, whether it's alcohol, whether it's partying, whether it's having a partner or a big group of friends, in order just to feel happy. But it sounds like you always were so close to your loneliness, and it really just loneliness. I don't know if that's a right. One of them has a negative meaning, but to me they don't. Neither being alone or lonely. I think it's a precious thing that I have, that I get to use every second of it without being like you. I get to say that I can do anything with my life without being responsible for anything else. Can you tell me a little about how you feel about that? Being like, it sounds like you spend a lot of time by yourself, and how that led to where you are today.
Yes, I suppose in many cases, I don't know if it was by design. I don't think I'm hardwired to be iconoclastic person, or to be on my own, or to be alone. I think I would love to have had lots of friends and family and all that around me. I don't think it was by choice, but it was the way it was. And I learned to cope. So I would, as a young boy, I would disappear into the jungle on my own, and spend as much time out there and making mistakes and taking risks I shouldn't have taken. It gave me time to think, and it gave me time to sort of reassess my values. That was important. I've written extensively about hunting, for example, in the days of the British Raj, and that has caught a lot of attention, but I never published it. I'm thinking of doing it. It's only short. It's only 20 pages. But I think there'll be a lot of people who are in that situation, particularly post-COVID, who went through a stage when they felt deeply, profoundly lonely and sad. But I always remember that, who was it? Mae West. She said something funny. She said, I'd rather be alone than wish that I was. You could have someone very close to you and just wish they were miles away, and just have the pleasure of your own company, your own thoughts. And there's I think it's a Norwegian saying that the strongest man is he who stands most alone. And in many ways, I think there's some truth in it. I'm not a natural performer. I'm not a natural public speaker. I'm not good at it. I just have to do it. People talk that I did a debate about many years ago, 15 years ago maybe. I'd never been in a debate before. And now I understand it's had, 50-something million views or something like that. And it's been translated into 20 languages. But I've never been in that debate before. And I felt very, very uncomfortable. So I think I've learned to make the best with what I've got and stumble my way through life without making too much of a fool of myself.
I love that you said that. This is what I keep telling people, that I'm an introvert. The last thing I want to do is to do public speaking, be in front of people. But I open my presentations that I'm putting myself out of my comfort zone by being here. And I want to do the same thing with you, because only when we are out of our comfort zone, we can get things done. And I'm going to end this soon, but I just want to say that I appreciate so much when you say, it's uncomfortable, but I do it because you're not doing it to find something that is comfortable, because otherwise you would be in bed. You're doing it because you know that it needs to be done. It was uncomfortable. It was new to you to do a debate. I'm sure you had fear. You had concerns, but you did it anyways because you knew that it had to be done, and you did it. And that's a new advice I'm trying to give people, that don't pursue jobs or careers that you think you just love to do, because if you love it, but it doesn't have the impact that is satisfactory, you're just going to be miserable. Sometimes I do a lot of things that I don't like to do, such as fundraising. I never saw it in myself just do fundraising and asking for money or writing grants. These are not things that I love to do, but I know I have to do it because there is a higher purpose, and I can't be happier. Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom. I think you are a fabulous person with an insane amount of experience running effective nonprofits, and it's just so great to share that with other people. And it's not the knowledge that I wanted to share, because knowledge you can read and gain, but it was your wisdom, and I really value your wisdom. I don't know a lot of people around me that have that much wisdom, and I'm so glad that I was able to channel it to younger people. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your contribution.
Thank you, Faraz. I must say you're an exceptional young man. You've got exemplary manners. You're extremely intelligent. You've got a lot of energy. I have grand hopes for what you're going to accomplish, and I'll be watching your future with great anticipation and a lot of joy. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.